We're going to start this afternoon session with Walter Mossberg. Walt is revered. Walt is feared. He's the critic. He's the oracle of new media for the Wall Street Journal, and he's going to kick off our afternoon by, I hope, doing a bit of a review of all the gee-whiz bang stuff that's going on in new technology.
Try my best, Moses.
Walt Mossberg.
Thank you. So all of us speakers, have 17 minutes, and I'm going to try to use my 17 minutes to talk to you about 5 things to keep in mind about the post-PC era. We are in the post-PC era. This is something I've been saying for a number of years, and I'm not the only one. Others have been saying it, but now it has been made certified and true because it has appeared on a Steve Jobs slide 2 weeks ago that we are in the post-PC era. And it's funny, but it's not funny. If it's on a Steve Jobs slide, then it kind of becomes a meme and it becomes true. So I'm going to use a post-PC device to consult some notes, but I'm going to start by talking about a pre-PC device called the electric hairdryer. Now, this is a device with which I personally have very little experience. But how many of you used an electric hairdryer this morning? Or in the last couple of days, whatever. I'm glad to see that people are hygienic and their hair is dry, those who have hair. When you picked up your electric hairdryer this morning in the hotel or your home or wherever you were, you did not say to yourself or your significant other, I'm going to go on the electrical grid and dry my hair. You did not say that. Or when you went and made toast, you did not say, I'm going to go on the electrical grid and make some toast. But you do say, people do say on the streets of Toronto, on the streets of Washington, D.C., where I work, on the streets of San Francisco, Tokyo, wherever, people say, I'm going on the internet. I went on the internet and I found this. And I would say to you that the less often you hear the word internet in people's conversations, the more important it is. You do not say the words electrical grid, but it runs our whole lives. Everything from that hair dryer to, linear accelerators run off the electrical grid, but nobody thinks anymore like they did when it was new that they were using it. So the first thing I would say is the post-PC era will be characterized and is being characterized by the internet essentially morphing into something as invisible as the electrical grid. And there will be many devices, not just PCs and Macs, not just these things which have become accepted iPhones or Android phones, or since we're in Canada, I'll mention Blackberries, as clients on the internet grid, but we're going to have a lot of things. Another term in the post-PC era that I think you will see fade, believe it or not, is the word television. Television. There already are lots of people, mostly younger people, but not entirely, who buy what we would call, and this is really, even as I'm saying these words, they sound archaic, a television set. What the hell is a set? A television set. But they don't connect a cable network or a satellite network to it, or even, get programming through the air with an antenna. What do they plug into it? A laptop, right? Or sometimes a set-top box like a Roku or an Apple TV or maybe their Xbox. And this is, so what is it? It's just a bigger screen. I don't know how many of you have an iPad or one of these iPhones, but there's a technology in here which Apple has announced it's expanding called AirPlay, which will just throw wirelessly whatever's on the screen of this to the big TV set. And in return, in order to keep you from cutting your subscription, the cable companies, at least in the US, have begun to put apps on the iPad, which, if you are already a subscriber, are free and don't cost any more, which would allow you to watch on the iPad anything you can watch on the cable. So these distinctions are all blurring in the post-PC era. Now, we've had two announcements, because Moses wanted me to talk about what's new, and I'm trying to give you kind of a high-level view, but there are a couple of specifics. We've had a couple announcements in the last couple of weeks that I think play right into this. One is iCloud, which also appeared on a Steve Jobs slide, which is Apple's forthcoming cloud service. They are hardly the first to have a cloud service, and their cloud service is more or less of a hybrid. They're going to put all your music and all your documents and all your calendar and contacts and photos and everything up in the cloud. They're going to synchronize them to all your devices, including, in some cases, Windows PCs, but obviously primarily their devices. The other one that's really kind of interesting, and I'm not having no way to know whether this will succeed, at least in the short term, is the Chromebook. This is a laptop-looking thing, and I want to say it's a laptop because it doesn't really have a lot of the qualities of the laptops you all own, from Google. It's coming from Samsung and Acer, but it's based on Google technology. It's completely cloud-based. When you turn it on, it's nothing but a big web browser. That's what it is. It is a web browser. That's the only application that lives on it. And everything you do via that giant web browser. So it has some very good qualities. It starts right up. It updates itself all the time because everything is being done from the cloud. But it also may have trouble working and doing all the things you want it to do when you're not connected to the internet. And since we live in a world where we're not constantly connected at good bandwidth, it may be a little early, but we'll see. Second thing about the post-PC era is the graphical user interface, known in the technology industry as the GUI, is dying. It's being replaced, and this is a huge thing. All by itself, this could be a 17-minute talk. It won't be, but the graphical user interface became popular with the Mac in 1984. It became really cemented, I think, in people's consciousness by Windows 95, Microsoft Windows 95. And you know what it is. It's the mouse and the icons on your desktop, which look like physical objects. They look like little manila file folders because whoever was designing it in those days felt this was the way to connect it to your thinking. This has been being replaced. How many have a touch device, a multi-touch device? An iPhone, an iPad, an Android device, an Android tablet or phone. Certain Blackberries run this way. I call this, and some other people do too, direct manipulation. Apple would call it multi-touch gesturing. And what you're doing here is, instead of using a mouse to indirectly move things around the screen, using your finger to directly move them around and do things. This is a change from the graphical user interface that has come to some laptops and desktops and not just portable devices, but we're moving into another whole area, and you're going to hear more about it from some of the other speakers, called NUI, the natural user interface. Things like the Connect array here, which other speakers will do magical things with, where I can stand in front of it, I can wave, and things happen on the device. Microsoft has obviously done a lot with this through Xbox, but it can control all kinds of other devices. Gesture Tech, which we'll be speaking, has worked on it. The third thing I would say about the post-PC era is that, yes, social networking is a big deal, but we're only in the first inning. And I would tell you that I think the social networking giants are beginning to discover that people do want to share. They just don't want to share everything with everybody. And this has not been the DNA of Facebook. They've been hugely successful, and I'm not up here saying they're suddenly going to fail or anything like that, but they are having to adjust to the idea that the radius of people with whom you want to share things is much smaller than the 1,000 friends you may have made in moments of folly or drunkenness in the first couple of years of their existence. How many have friends they can't remember who they are on Facebook? Yeah. But you're kind of afraid to defriend them because even though they're not supposed to find out that you've defriended them, there are various pieces of software that let people know. And you don't want to be thought of as a jerk now. See, all their stuff appears in your stream, but you don't really care that they just had pepperoni pizza. Even Twitter, interestingly, has had to change its point of view already in a fairly short period of time. The Twitter founders, and Twitter, as you know, operates on a different basis than Facebook. The Twitter founders originally felt like what they wanted to do was encourage people who were Twitter members to tweet a lot. Now, if you listen to their rhetoric or even look at their redesigns of their website, they're kind of saying, you know what, you can be a full participant in Twitter if you don't tweet very much, if you just read what's on here. And so, you know, there was this ethos for a while that, well, if 1,000 people were following you, you better follow 1,000 other people. And now, I think they're recognizing that you should be pretty careful about who you follow because you want to follow people who are going to say interesting things or point you to interesting links about the things you care about. The fourth point I would make about the post-PC era is that we're in a new platform war. There were two big platform wars in the history of personal technology so far. One was the Windows versus Mac platform war in the 80s, which Microsoft won handily. And the second was the Netscape versus Internet Explorer platform war in the 90s, which Microsoft won handily. We're now in a platform war that probably involves 4 or 5 companies, depending how you count them. I run a tech conference called All Things Digital, and we just wrapped it up a couple weeks ago, and Eric Schmidt appeared there. You know, he's now the chairman of Google, and said there was a gang of 4 companies running a platform war in this post-PC era. They were, in his estimation, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. He left off the list Microsoft, which caused the guy from Microsoft we interviewed the next day to open up his appearance by saying, anything called the Gang of 4 does not end well. I would not be so sure that Microsoft shouldn't be on that list, but whether it's 4 or 5, or whether you think Twitter should be on the list, whatever, there's a platform war. And why I call it a platform war is because all of these companies have built technology platforms on which other companies are building applications and services. And so you have to make a choice as consumers. If you choose an iPhone or an iPad, an iOS device as they're called, there are 425,000 third-party apps, of which 90,000 are optimized for the iPad. If you choose Android, you get a couple of 100,000 apps, of which so far very few have been optimized for tablets, but I assume that number will grow. One of the troubles that RIM has been attracting large number of third-party apps because they've been very corporate and very security-focused, and it's been a little more difficult to write apps, but they're aware of it and they're working on it. Facebook is a platform. It's not just a social network. How many people play, I'm almost afraid to ask this, Farmville? Okay, nobody here. How many play Words with Friends, let's say? Scrabble-licious, any of these things? There are a million games on there, and there are also other apps that are charitable and perform other functions, but they're built on Facebook as a platform. Amazon, a lot of people don't know this, has an enormous business that has nothing to do with e-readers, nothing to do with selling you physical goods. You can buy that hairdryer on Amazon, by the way. They have an enormous business renting cloud services to other companies. So Amazon is also a platform. The fifth and last thing I'd like to just mention that I think is going to, and already has begun to characterize the post-PC era, is the consumerization of the enterprise, the consumerization of IT. Is there anyone here who works in IT at a big company or government agency or anything? Well, remember that for many years, for decades, this is where technology was driven, inside the big organizations. The IT department would give you some kind of laptop or desktop. They would give you maybe a BlackBerry, and they would say, this is what we use at our company, this is what you have to use. If you didn't want to use that in your personal life, you would be juggling 2 phones or 2 laptops or whatever it is. Now, these barriers are breaking down tremendously. I don't mean there aren't necessarily some different uses, some different kinds of software, some different security needs in companies and in families, although I have to tell you, I think the differences get exaggerated. But I do know this, and I hear this all the time. From both the top of the company and the bottom of the company, these IT departments are being told, we want to use the devices and the software we want to use to get our job done, and not what you tell us we have to use. And they're getting this, not so much from the middle, they're getting it from the CEO and the CFO and the marketing, the chief marketing officer, or whoever they are at the top of the company, who say, this iPad is awesome, why don't we issue these? And when the IT people say, well, security, and we don't know how to fix it, and whatever, they don't want to hear about it, and they have to issue them to the CEO. The other end of the spectrum is recruiting. They go out to hire some young person, and that young person wants to use their Android phone or their iPhone or their iPad or their Mac or whatever they have that's not been approved for 25 years at the company. They go to another company. So if you want to recruit these people, you've got to become more flexible. So the post-PC era is going to involve the loss of power that has long been held in the hands of the people in the IT department in the glass room at the company. And that is 27 seconds shy of my 17 minutes. Thank you. Is that okay?
Thanks very much, Walt. I just want to say that Walt is really a fixture practically at a number of elite conferences of a similar nature to this, the original TED,
yes,
the EG conference,
right,
your own conference. We're
but
honored.
Now I've capped my career as a conference speaker by being here.
Excellent. We're very pleased to have you here.
In a beautiful city, at a beautiful hall, and with a brilliant organizer.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's great.